3 weeks ago, Jesus appeared to me in my living room and revealed something that will fundamentally change how you see everything around you. I know exactly how that sounds. Trust me, in the days since, I have questioned my own sanity more times than I can count. But what happened next, what he showed me about the hidden battle that is raging all around us, right now, is something I can no longer keep to myself. But before I begin my story, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time at Island. I just want to feel that I'm not entirely alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you are about to hear, please consider subscribing. It helps give me the strength I need to continue to speak my truth. Now, let's get into my story. It all started with something that seemed completely and utterly ordinary. I was sitting in my living room, precisely 3 weeks ago, the soft, warm glow of the lamp casting long, gentle shadows around me. It was late in the evening, one of those rare, precious moments when the world finally feels still and the usual cacophony of the day fades into a quiet, peaceful background hum. But there had been this stirring inside of me for days, a quiet anticipation, almost like waiting for something that hovered just beyond the edges of what I could see or grasp. What I didn't know then was that I was on the precipice of a revelation that would shatter everything I thought I understood about the world we inhabit. For days, I had felt this growing curiosity, a persistent pull towards understanding what lies beyond the surface of our daily lives. It began 3 weeks ago during my morning coffee. There was a sudden, profound awareness that the steam rising from my cup was somehow more than just vapor. It was as if a veil had been lifted just a little, revealing fleeting glimpses of a reality that is both intimately familiar and yet profoundly mysterious. I don't fully know what to call it, but it was more than just a passing thought or a fleeting feeling. It was a deep, resonant sense that there is so much more to this world than meets the eye, something deeper and more real than the material things we usually focus our attention on. I remember sitting in complete silence earlier that week, almost like I was waiting for a word or a sign, anything to confirm that this palpable sense of anticipation wasn't just a product of my own imagination. The old grandfather clock in the hallway had mysteriously stopped at 3:17. And in that peculiar, profound silence, I wasn't looking for anything dramatic, just a subtle confirmation that I wasn't alone in sensing these hidden layers of reality. In that stillness, I felt an openness growing inside me, a willingness to be receptive to whatever might come. It was a quiet surrender, a readiness to listen, even if the answers or experiences might challenge the very foundations of what I thought I knew. This feeling isn't easy to describe. It's not like the excitement of a new adventure or the thrill of discovering something novel. It's softer, more profound, like standing at the edge of an ocean you've never seen before, knowing you're about to wade into waters that will irrevocably change you. At times it feels like a gentle whisper nudging me to pay attention, to be alert to the presence of something far greater at work. I've been thinking a lot about how often we live our lives focused solely on what we can see, touch, or measure. Yesterday, I watched my neighbor frantically searching for his lost keys, pacing back and forth in his driveway, completely unaware of the tiny sparrow that had been watching him from the fence for a full 10 minutes, as if it were a silent observer to his human drama. We get so caught up in our schedules, our tasks, and the incessant demands of the moment, and it's so easy to forget that there might be unseen realities influencing everything around us. This anticipation I'm feeling is a powerful reminder that the world is much bigger, much more complex than the limited view our five senses provide. It's as if there's a hidden dimension, a spiritual landscape that exists alongside the physical one, and it's calling out for us to notice it. I won't pretend to have all the answers or to fully understand what all of this means yet, but I do know that being open to these experiences requires a deep sense of humility and patience. It means trusting that what I sense or glimpse is real, even if it can't always be explained or proven through conventional means. Last Tuesday, I felt compelled to take a different route to work. There was no logical reason for it, just a distinct inner nudge. That seemingly random detour led me past a homeless man I had never seen before. Something in his eyes, a depth of both pain and resilience, made me stop. We talked for 20 minutes, and I left that encounter knowing with absolute certainty that it was orchestrated by something far beyond mere coincidence. Tonight, as I sit here reflecting, I feel a quiet hope stirring within me. It's the hope that by opening my heart and mind to these hidden realities, I might gain a deeper understanding not just of the world around me, but of my true place within it. There's a longing to connect with something eternal and unchanging, something that offers meaning beyond the temporary and the visible. I find myself wondering how many others might share this same sense of anticipation, this quiet curiosity about what lies just beyond the surface. How many people long for a glimpse of the unseen truths that shape our lives? My friend Sarah mentioned something strikingly similar last week, a feeling that she was waiting for something to happen, though she couldn't explain what. And how often do we truly allow ourselves the space and quiet to listen for those deeper realities? It's strange how easy it is to overlook these things when life gets busy, or when the endless distractions of the world pull us in 1,000 different directions. But in these quiet moments, when the noise fades and the heart is still, there's a chance to tune in to the subtle movements of the spirit. It's like catching the faintest hint of a song that's always been playing in the background, if only we would stop long enough to truly hear it. I want to be completely honest about my own journey in this. There have been moments of profound doubt and hesitation, times when I questioned whether these feelings were just wishful thinking or something more substantial. Last weekend, I almost dismissed the entire experience as stress-induced imagination. But I've come to realize that doubt isn't the opposite of faith. It's a part of the process. It's a sign that we're wrestling with something real and meaningful, not just chasing illusions. So, I'm choosing to embrace this sense of openness, to remain curious and expectant about what might come next. I'm inviting myself, and anyone listening, to be willing to step into the unknown with a spirit of faith and humility. It's not about having all the answers or avoiding uncertainty, but about being fully present and attentive to the ways in which the divine might be moving in our lives. As I write this, I'm reminded that these moments of quiet reflection are sacred in their own right. They are precious opportunities to connect with a deeper source of wisdom and love that transcends our everyday experiences. And even if what we receive is subtle or difficult to articulate, it can still transform us from within. I want to encourage you, if you're feeling the same stirring or curiosity, to hold on to it. Don't dismiss it or push it aside because it feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable. Instead, create space in your own life to listen, to pray, meditate, or simply sit in silence and see what unfolds. Sometimes the greatest revelations come not in spectacular visions or loud proclamations, but in the gentle, persistent whisper of the Spirit calling us home. For me, this sense of anticipation is like a door opening just a crack, inviting me to peek into a world that's been there all along, just waiting to be discovered. It's a reminder that we are part of something much larger than ourselves, connected to a reality that can't be captured by words alone. And that invitation is both profoundly humbling and exhilarating. Tonight, as I close this reflection, I'm holding on to a quiet expectation. I don't know exactly what lies ahead, but I'm ready to be present for whatever comes next. I want to walk this path with an open heart, trusting that even the smallest glimpse of the unseen can change everything. So, here I am, sharing this moment with you, hoping that it resonates in some way, and that together we can journey deeper into the mysteries that surround us. There's a whole world waiting beyond what we can see. And I believe it's calling us to awaken, to listen, and to step into the fullness of life that has been promised all along. Hey everyone, it's been a few nights since I shared those initial reflections. And tonight, I want to tell you about something that happened that shattered every single expectation I had about how God might reveal himself. It wasn't the gentle stirring I had been experiencing. This was immediate, overwhelming, and undeniably real. I was resting in my chair around 9 p.m., my mind calm and open, when suddenly, the very temperature in the room seemed to shift. The air became thick, heavy, almost electric. And then this presence filled the space, not gradually, but all at once, like light instantly flooding a dark room. It was Jesus. Not the peaceful, pastoral image from Sunday school paintings, but a presence with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. His eyes held both infinite compassion and an urgency I had never encountered before. The atmosphere around us was charged with a kind of sacred stillness that made every other sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, fade into complete and total silence. I sensed immediately that what he was about to reveal wasn't just for me, but carried profound implications far beyond my small living room. When he spoke, it wasn't with an audible voice, but with a clarity that bypassed my ears entirely and resonated deep within my very soul. He began by unveiling something that challenged everything I thought I knew about the world we live in. Picture an iceberg, he seemed to say. What you see above the water is real, but it is only a fraction of what lies beneath. He showed me that beneath the surface of our daily lives, there exists a hidden reality, a spiritual realm that actively influences what happens in the physical world. This realm isn't a distant or abstract concept. It's alive and ever-present, shaping events and the very fabric of human experience in ways we often overlook or dismiss as coincidence. As he continued, I began to understand that much of what we see around us, conflicts between neighbors, the rise and fall of leaders, moments of unexplained despair, or sudden, inexplicable hope, are reflections of this unseen battle between forces of light and darkness. I thought of the news I had watched that very morning, the story of a small town that had come together to rebuild after a devastating fire. What looked like simple human kindness was actually light pushing back against forces that sought to divide and destroy. It's a battle not fought with conventional weapons or armies, but with spiritual realities that impact our hearts and minds. I felt both a sense of awe and a profound weight settle over me as I realized that this vision was more than just a revelation, it was a commissioning. The way a general might brief his soldiers before a crucial mission, Jesus was preparing me for something significant. He explained that this hidden world is filled with beings and forces that influence human choices and circumstances. But here's what struck me most. It's also a realm where love, faith, and truth possess extraordinary power. These aren't just nice concepts we discuss in church. They are potent weapons in this spiritual conflict. When my neighbor chose forgiveness over revenge last month, when the cashier at the grocery store showed genuine kindness to the difficult customer ahead of me, these weren't random acts. They were strategic strikes against the darkness. It was as if he was pulling back a curtain on reality itself, inviting me to see beyond the ordinary and recognize the spiritual dynamics at play in every single moment. I remember my heart racing as the magnitude of this realization hit me. Every choice, every interaction, every thought carries weight in this unseen realm. I felt overwhelmed by the responsibility, yet also deeply hopeful. The vision made it clear that while darkness is real and active, it is not victorious. The light of God's love and truth is infinitely stronger, though it requires our vigilance and participation to hold firm. Jesus emphasized that humanity isn't merely a passive observer in this struggle, but an active participant. That conversation I'd had with the homeless man, the decision to help my elderly neighbor with her groceries, the choice to speak truthfully when a lie would have been easier, all of these had real, tangible consequences in this spiritual battle. He urged me to be awake, to remain alert to the subtle ways the enemy tries to sow confusion and despair. I thought of the deep discouragement I had felt last week when a project at work fell through. I recalled how it had spiraled into me, questioning my own worth and purpose. Now I could see it for what it was, an attack designed to weaken my faith and effectiveness. It was a stark reminder that we can't afford to be naive or complacent. There is a war being waged for the hearts of people, and it plays out in ways both seen and unseen. But at the same time, he offered a reassurance that rocked me to my core. The power of love and truth, when embraced and lived out, doesn't just resist darkness, it obliterates it. I saw flashes of moments throughout history. Abolitionists whose unwavering love for justice broke chains of oppression, individuals who chose truth over personal gain and, in doing so, changed the course of entire communities. Parents whose faithful, sacrificial love transformed broken family lines for generations. As Jesus continued, I felt his deep, profound compassion for the world, the pain, the brokenness, and the universal longing for something greater. But it wasn't a distant pity. It was the ache of a father watching his children stumble in the dark when light is so readily available. He invited me to step into a posture of courage and faith, recognizing that this awareness isn't meant to lead to fear, but to empowerment. Like a coach preparing an athlete for a championship competition, he was equipping me with knowledge that would make me more effective, not more anxious. The vision was intimate, yet also incredibly expansive. I felt as if I were being given a glimpse into a vast cosmic reality, one where every act of kindness, every heartfelt prayer, every stand for truth ripples through this hidden realm like stones thrown into still water. It was humbling to realize that our lives have such profound significance in a spiritual context, and that God's kingdom is actively present and advancing even when it seems invisible to the naked eye. Jesus didn't sugarcoat the difficulties ahead. He made it clear that this path requires perseverance and discernment. The forces of darkness are cunning and persistent, often working through deception and subtlety rather than overt displays of power. I thought of how easily I'd been distracted from prayer by seemingly urgent but ultimately trivial matters, how arguments that should have been resolved quickly had stretched on for days due to wounded pride. He encouraged me to develop spiritual discernment, to learn to recognize the difference between what is of God and what is not, to guard my heart and mind against distractions and lies. At the same time, he emphasized the critical importance of anchoring ourselves in love and truth. These are the weapons that defeat the darkness, the light that exposes falsehood and brings true freedom. The vision impressed upon me that living out our faith authentically through acts of compassion, integrity, and courage is an integral part of this spiritual warfare. It's not about seeking confrontation for its own sake, but about embodying the reality of God's kingdom here and now. I recall feeling a mixture of awe and urgency as the vision continued to unfold. It was like being entrusted with intelligence that could change everything, not just for me, but for everyone willing to hear it. Jesus' presence was steady and unwavering, a constant reminder that he is the source of all strength and wisdom in this battle. I understood that this was not just about me or any one person, but about a collective awakening, an invitation for all believers to see the world through this spiritual lens. In the vision, I also sensed a call to profound humility. The awareness of these spiritual dynamics isn't a reason for pride or superiority, but a prompt to remain utterly dependent on God's guidance and grace. Jesus reminded me that without him, we are vulnerable and limited, but with him, we have access to power and protection beyond anything we can imagine. It was like being shown the difference between trying to fight a war with toy weapons versus having access to the most advanced military technology ever created. As the vision began to fade, I felt a deep peace settle over me, mixed with a resolve I had never experienced before. It was clear that this revelation was not just for private reflection, but for sharing to help others awaken to the reality of the spiritual realm and their vital role within it. I sensed a responsibility to encourage vigilance, faith, and love in the face of the unseen battles that affect every part of our lives. Since that night, I've been pondering how to live in light of this vision. It challenges me to look beyond surface appearances and to cultivate a spirit of discernment and prayerfulness. It calls me to be a witness to the power of God's kingdom breaking into the world, even when that power is not immediately visible. I want to encourage you, if you're hearing this, to be open to these deeper realities. Don't dismiss the spiritual dimension as something distant or irrelevant. Instead, be willing to see the world with new eyes, recognizing the ongoing struggle between light and darkness, and the vital role each of us plays in that story. This vision has changed how I perceive so many things: the news, personal struggles, relationships, and even my own inner battles. It's a reminder that nothing happens by accident, and that there is a divine purpose woven through all of life's complexities. And most of all, it's a call to live with courage and hope, knowing that the power of love and truth is greater than any darkness we may face. I believe that as we awaken to these spiritual truths, we can begin to walk in greater freedom and purpose. We can become beacons of light in a world that desperately needs it. So, let's keep our hearts open, our minds alert, and our spirits anchored in the love of God, ready to stand firm in the face of whatever challenges lie ahead. Hey everyone, it's been a few days since I shared about that vision, and I've been reflecting deeply on the message Jesus revealed. Tonight I want to dive into something that has completely revolutionized how I see daily life. The hidden truth about how much of what shapes our world is influenced by spiritual forces operating in an unseen battle between light and darkness. What I'm about to share isn't theoretical. It's a reality that's not often talked about openly, yet it's crucial for us to understand if we want to live with purpose and clarity. In the vision, Jesus showed me something that made my previous understanding seem like looking at the world through a keyhole. The world we see, the events making headlines, the cultural shifts that seem to happen overnight, the personal struggles that feel so random, are only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, there's a spiritual dimension where forces of good and evil are actively engaged in a cosmic struggle that would make any earthly war seem small by comparison. Picture this. Every major decision made in corporate boardrooms, every election, every single moment when someone chooses between selfishness and sacrifice, there are spiritual forces at work influencing, pressing, and contending for the outcome. This isn't some distant myth or abstract idea. It's an ongoing, real-time battle that impacts everything from the fate of nations to the argument you had with your spouse last week. One of the most profound revelations Jesus shared was how love, faith, and truth function as powerful weapons in this battle. When I first heard this, I thought of the usual Sunday school answers. Be nice, believe in God, don't lie. But what he showed me was far more dynamic and potent. Love isn't just a warm feeling. It's a force that can shatter strongholds of bitterness and heal generational wounds. I thought of my friend Marcus, whose courageous decision to forgive his father after years of abuse didn't just heal their relationship. It broke a cycle of violence that had plagued his family for 3 generations. Faith acts as both a shield and a sword, protecting our hearts from deception while also empowering believers to act far beyond their natural limitations. I remembered reading about Harriet Tubman, how her unwavering faith gave her a supernatural courage and wisdom to lead hundreds to freedom despite impossible odds. Truth shines like a powerful floodlight in darkness, exposing lies and guiding us on the right path. When journalists risk their lives to expose corruption, when whistleblowers choose integrity over personal security, they are wielding spiritual weapons, whether they realize it or not. This revelation made me realize how often we underestimate the spiritual power of these qualities in our daily lives. That moment when you choose love over anger in traffic, faith over doubt when facing a daunting medical diagnosis, truth over a convenient lie in a business deal, you are actively participating in this unseen battle. Each choice we make sends shockwaves through the spiritual realm, contributing to either light or darkness, gaining ground in ways we can't immediately see but that have eternal consequences. Jesus also highlighted humanity's role in this struggle, and this part left me speechless. We aren't merely pawns on a cosmic chessboard or helpless victims of circumstance. Instead, we have been given the capacity and the calling to actively engage in spreading light. Our prayers don't just comfort us, they move spiritual mountains. Our actions don't just affect our immediate circumstances, they influence the spiritual climate around us. Even our thoughts matter in this spiritual context, because the battlefield often begins in the mind. What struck me most was the urgency in Jesus' message as he urged vigilance. The enemy, he explained, is cunning beyond human imagination, and often works through means so subtle we miss them entirely. I thought about how arguments that should resolve quickly can spiral into relationship-ending conflicts, how minor disappointments can mushroom into crushing despair, how small compromises can gradually erode our moral foundations. These aren't just natural human tendencies. They're often the result of deliberate spiritual warfare. The enemy's tactics include lies disguised as truth, like the belief that happiness comes from accumulating more stuff, divisions sown through seemingly small offenses. Remember how that one comment at last year's family dinner is still causing rifts? And despair that creeps in through calculated discouragement. It's a reminder that the battle is often fought not with overt displays of evil, but through deception, distraction, and spiritual exhaustion. Yet, despite the intensity of this struggle, the vision was saturated with hope. Jesus assured me that the forces of light are not just stronger, they are overwhelmingly superior. It's like comparing a single candle to the sundae, but that victory requires our cooperation, our willingness to stand firm, to resist temptation, and to actively live out the values of the kingdom. I remember feeling that mixture of awe and responsibility wash over me as I absorbed this message. It's one thing to believe in spiritual warfare as a theological concept, but it's entirely different to realize how intimately it is woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. This awareness changes how we view challenges, setbacks, and even the people around us. I saw clearly that every act of kindness pushes back the darkness. When my neighbor brought soup to the elderly woman across the street, she wasn't just being nice, she was striking a blow against forces of isolation and despair. When the teacher stayed late to help a struggling student, when the doctor chose to truly listen to a patient's concerns, when someone chose forgiveness over bitterness, darkness retreats. Conversely, when we give in to bitterness, fear, or falsehood, we unknowingly give the enemy a foothold. That grudge I held against my former business partner, that fear that kept me from pursuing the calling I felt, that small lie I told to avoid embarrassment, each created an opening for darkness to gain influence. This made me reflect on how important it is to cultivate a lifestyle rooted in love, faith, and truth, not just as ideals to admire, but as daily choices that have real spiritual impact. The vision also revealed the interconnectedness of all believers in this struggle. We're not lone warriors. We're part of a vast army engaged in the same battle across time and geography. This unity is essential because the darkness often tries to isolate and divide us, making the fight seem overwhelming. But when we come together in love and truth, we form a powerful front that can withstand any attack the enemy launches. Jesus reminded me that this battle is not just external but also internal. Each of us faces temptations and struggles that reflect this cosmic conflict on a personal level. The call is to be vigilant in guarding our hearts and minds, recognizing that the enemy seeks to steal our peace and joy through subtle attacks on our spirit. Sometimes the battlefield is our thought life. Sometimes it's our relationships. Sometimes it's our sense of purpose and calling. What brought me incredible comfort in this part of the vision was the assurance that we are not left to fight alone. Jesus is present, empowering us with his spirit and equipping us with every spiritual resource we need. The love he pours into our hearts isn't just emotional comfort, it's a source of strength that never fails. His truth isn't just information, it's a firm foundation beneath our feet that cannot be shaken. As I reflect on all this, I'm reminded that living with awareness of these hidden realities requires intentionality. It means cultivating prayer as a way to stay connected to God's power and guidance. It means developing discernment to recognize the enemy's tactics and to choose wisely. And it means embodying compassion because love is the ultimate weapon that defeats darkness. This part of the vision has challenged me to look beyond appearances and to seek the spiritual truth behind the events and emotions that fill our lives. It has encouraged me to be more mindful of the unseen influences at work and to respond with faith and courage rather than fear or passivity. I want to encourage you to consider how this hidden battle might be playing out in your own life. Are there areas where darkness is trying to gain ground through discouragement, division, or deception? Are there places where love, faith, and truth can shine brighter? Sometimes the spiritual fight is quiet and unseen, but that doesn't make it any less real or important. The vision also reminded me that our ultimate victory doesn't depend on our own strength, but on God's power working through us. This gives me hope and confidence to keep pressing forward, knowing that every small act of obedience and love contributes to the unfolding of God's kingdom. We're not fighting for victory, we're fighting from victory because the outcome has already been determined. As I close this reflection for tonight, I feel a renewed commitment to live with greater awareness of the spiritual dimension. It's a call to wake up, to stay alert, and to actively participate in the spreading of light in a world that desperately needs it. I'm grateful for the trust Jesus placed in me to share this message and for the opportunity to invite you into this deeper understanding. Together, let's embrace the role we've been given as bearers of light, standing firm in love, faith, and truth, knowing that the unseen forces of good are working alongside us to bring hope and healing to the world. Hey everyone, it's late again, and I'm sitting here with a full heart, feeling both the weight and the incredible hope of everything I've been sharing with you. After that vision and the revelations about the unseen battle and the power of love, faith, and truth, I found myself facing a crucial question. How do we actually live in awareness of these hidden realities? What does it look like day to day to walk this path? Jesus showed me a path that acknowledges spiritual warfare but also promises hope and victory. What I discovered next was that Jesus didn't just reveal these earth-shattering truths and then leave me to figure it out on my own. He offered practical, concrete guidance for living with this awareness, for cultivating a life that's anchored in God even as the spiritual battle rages around us. It became clear that awareness alone isn't enough. It must be lived out intentionally, with humility and steadfastness. The first thing Jesus emphasized was the absolute necessity of prayer. But he wasn't talking about the routine, repetitive prayers many of us learned as children. Prayer, he showed me, is a vital lifeline to God's presence and power. It's like having a direct communication line to military headquarters during wartime. Through prayer, we connect with the source of all light and truth, drawing strength and discernment for the battles ahead. It's in prayer that we gain insight into the spiritual realities influencing our lives and find the courage to stand firm. He encouraged me to cultivate a daily rhythm of prayer, not just in moments of crisis when we're desperate for help, but consistently as a way of life. I started getting up just 15 minutes earlier to spend time in prayer before the day's demands hit. What I discovered was remarkable. Days that began with prayer seemed to have a different quality. Challenges felt more manageable, relationships were smoother, and I had a clearer sense of God's presence throughout the day. Alongside prayer, discernment emerged as another crucial skill. Jesus impressed upon me the importance of being able to recognize the subtle ways the enemy tries to deceive and distract us. This isn't always obvious. The spiritual battle often appears in quiet whispers of doubt, suggestions that seem logical but lead us away from God's best, or emotions that feel justified but ultimately destroy peace in our relationships. I learned to ask myself questions throughout the day. Is this thought bringing me closer to God or further away? Is this emotion producing good fruit in my life? Does this decision align with love, faith, and truth? To live with awareness means learning to listen deeply, to test what we hear and see against the truth of God's word and the witness of the Spirit. Discernment becomes like spiritual radar, protecting us from falling into traps that can weaken our faith or cause division. Compassion also stood out as essential, but not in the way I expected. Jesus showed me that love isn't just a weapon against darkness, it's also a posture, an attitude toward others that reflects the heart of God. Living with awareness means being compassionate even toward those who may be caught in darkness or deception themselves. It means choosing to respond with kindness and patience, knowing that the spiritual battle affects everyone differently. I thought of my coworker who had been increasingly difficult to work with. Instead of seeing him as the problem, I began to recognize that he might be under spiritual attack, battling discouragement, family pressures, or health concerns I knew nothing about. This shift in perspective completely changed how I interacted with him, and gradually our working relationship improved. Compassion creates bridges rather than walls, building a community where light can flourish. Humility was another cornerstone of the guidance I received, and this one challenged me deeply. Jesus reminded me that awareness of spiritual realities could easily lead to pride or a sense of superiority if we're not careful. It's tempting to think that having special insights makes us better than others or gives us the right to judge. Instead, he called for a spirit of humility, recognizing that without God's grace, we are vulnerable and limited in every way. This humility keeps us grounded, dependent on God's strength rather than our own, and open to correction and growth. I had to acknowledge my own tendency towards spiritual pride and commit to regular self-examination. Humility also means being willing to learn from others, even from those who may not share our level of spiritual awareness. The vision also prepared me for the reality of intensified spiritual warfare. Jesus didn't minimize the challenges, but prepared me to expect attacks on various fronts: health, relationships, reputation, and even finances. He reminded me that such difficulties are often signs that we're on the right path, that the enemy is trying to discourage or distract us from our calling. I've experienced this firsthand since the vision. There have been unexpected health issues, misunderstandings with close friends, and financial pressures that seem to come out of nowhere. But instead of being discouraged, I now recognize these as confirmations that I'm moving in the right direction. The key is to remain steadfast, to hold fast to faith, and not be shaken by trials or setbacks. Jesus strongly encouraged me to build a support system of accountability people who knew me before these experiences, who could speak truth into my life and help me stay humble and focused. He showed me that we're not meant to walk this path alone. Community, accountability, and shared prayer are vital to staying strong and resisting the subtle snares of pride and deception. I reached out to 3 friends who have known me for years and asked them to hold me accountable. We meet monthly to pray together and discuss how we're growing spiritually. They have my permission to call me out if they see pride or unhealthy patterns developing. This has been invaluable in keeping me grounded. Another crucial piece of the guidance was the call to generosity and service. Jesus reminded me that living out this awareness means not just protecting ourselves, but actively serving others without seeking recognition. When we give freely, love sacrificially, and serve quietly, we participate in the work of God's kingdom in tangible ways. This service becomes a testimony to the reality of God's love and a powerful counter to the darkness around us. I started volunteering at a local homeless shelter, not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to put love into action. What I've discovered is that serving others isn't just about helping them. It's about participating in God's work of restoration and healing in the world. Jesus also warned about the temptation to idolize success or comfort. It's easy to fall into the trap of valuing popularity, recognition, or ease above faithfulness and integrity. He called me to be willing to walk away from success if it ever compromised my commitment to him or led to pride. Character, he said, matters infinitely more than talent or achievement. How we represent him through our actions and attitudes is the true measure of our faithfulness. This has meant making some difficult choices about opportunities that came my way. I turned down a lucrative business deal because it would have required compromising my values. I stepped back from a leadership position when I realized I was becoming prideful about the recognition it brought. These decisions were costly in worldly terms, but brought a deep sense of peace and integrity. I remember feeling both relief and challenge hearing these instructions. Relief because it was clear that God equips and prepares us for this journey. Challenge because it requires intentional effort and daily commitment. Jesus didn't promise an easy road, but he assured me of his presence and power every step of the way. He also reminded me that spiritual warfare intensifies with any form of public ministry or visible service. Attacks may come in many forms on health, relationships, or reputation and can be subtle or overt. I was encouraged to be vigilant and to trust God even when facing potential scandals or misunderstandings, whether real or fabricated. The call is to remain anchored in God's approval rather than the world's applause. Throughout the vision, Jesus impressed upon me that our primary purpose is to glorify God, not to build our own kingdoms or seek personal recognition. This perspective helps keep the heart pure and focused amid the challenges. And when difficulties come, as they inevitably will, the call is to persevere with faith, knowing that God's ultimate victory is assured. Living with this awareness also means embracing a posture of ongoing learning and growth. There's no room for complacency or spiritual laziness. Jesus invited me to continually seek his guidance through regular fasting and prayer, to immerse myself in Scripture, and to stay connected to the community of faith. This intentionality helps build resilience and keeps the spiritual senses sharp. One of the most profound parts of the guidance was the encouragement to live with unshakable hope. Even in the midst of intense spiritual warfare, there is a promise of victory and restoration that cannot be broken. Jesus' love and truth are unstoppable forces that will ultimately overcome every darkness. This hope is not passive, wishful thinking, but a confident expectation rooted in the unchanging character of God. As I've reflected on all this, I realize that living with awareness is less about fear and more about empowerment. It's about stepping into the fullness of life God offers, equipped to face challenges with courage and grace. It's a call to live authentically, to be a light in the darkness, and to trust God's promises even when the battle feels intense. I want to encourage you to consider how these practical steps might look in your own life. Maybe it's setting aside regular time for prayer, or finding trusted friends for accountability. Maybe it's learning to discern more deeply, or choosing daily acts of compassion. Each of these small but intentional actions helps build a life rooted in God's presence and power. Tonight, as I sit here sharing this with you, I feel a renewed sense of commitment to live out these truths. It's a journey of faith, humility, and perseverance, but it's also a journey filled with hope and profound purpose. I'm grateful for the guidance Jesus gave me, and for the opportunity to invite you to join me in walking this path. Let's keep encouraging each other to stay alert, to pray without ceasing, and to live with hearts full of love and truth. The battle is real, but so is the victory. And together, with God's help, we can stand firm and be agents of his light in a world longing for hope. Hey everyone, it's quiet here tonight, and I'm feeling the weight and the urgency of everything I've been sharing with you over these past reflections. The vision, the messages, the guidance, they all converge now into something larger, something I believe isn't just for me, but for every believer who longs to awaken to the deeper truths of our faith and the spiritual realm. There's a pressing need for unity, love, and perseverance as we navigate this unseen yet incredibly real battlefield. What I'm about to share feels like the culmination of everything Jesus revealed to me, a final call that echoes with both urgency and extraordinary hope. This awakening isn't optional anymore. The comfortable Christianity of Sunday mornings and Wednesday night services isn't sufficient for what's coming. Jesus made it clear that this is a call to rise up, to see beyond the surface, and to embrace the reality that we are engaged in a cosmic struggle that impacts every aspect of life. But here's what struck me most powerfully. This call isn't meant to instill fear, but to ignite courage. Courage rooted in the unshakable assurance that God's kingdom is advancing and that we are invited to participate actively in its unfolding. It's like being recruited for the most important mission in human history. I sense Jesus' heart deeply longing for his people to come together, setting aside the petty divisions and fears that have weakened the church and standing united as bearers of light. The enemy's primary strategy has always involved sowing discord and isolation, breaking believers down one by one until we feel powerless and alone. But Jesus reminded me that our greatest strength lies in our unity, in loving one another deeply and persevering together through whatever challenges come. Think about the early church, how they shared everything, prayed together, and faced persecution as a unified body. That wasn't just a historical accident. It was a spiritual strategy. When believers come together in genuine love and common purpose, something supernatural happens that the forces of darkness cannot withstand. The vision emphasized love again, but this time with even greater intensity, not as a vague sentiment we sing about in worship songs, but as a powerful active force that binds us together and defeats darkness. This love calls us to reach out to others in compassion, even when it's difficult, even when we don't fully understand their struggles or their perspectives. It's a love that reflects the very heart of God, who pursues us relentlessly and invites us into his family regardless of our past failures or current weaknesses. I thought of the divisions I've seen in churches, arguments over worship styles, theological disagreements that split congregations, racial tensions that have gone unaddressed for decades. Jesus showed me that these divisions aren't just unfortunate human conflicts, they're strategic victories for the enemy. Every time believers choose conflict over reconciliation, judgment over grace, isolation over community, darkness gains ground. Perseverance emerged as another critical theme. The journey of faith and spiritual awakening is not a sprint where we experience one powerful moment and then coast. It's a marathon that requires endurance, determination, and the willingness to keep going when everything in us wants to quit. There will be trials that seem insurmountable, moments of doubt that feel overwhelming, and times when the darkness seems so thick we can barely see the light ahead. But Jesus encouraged me with reminders of faithful people throughout history who persevered against impossible odds. Think of the abolitionists who fought for decades to end slavery, often facing violent opposition and discouragement. Consider the believers behind the Iron Curtain who maintained their faith through decades of brutal persecution. Remember the civil rights leaders who continued marching despite dogs, fire hoses, and death threats. Each of these examples shows that perseverance in the face of darkness ultimately leads to breakthrough and transformation. He reminded me that every effort made in faith, no matter how small it might seem, contributes to the ultimate victory. That prayer you whispered when you were too tired to speak aloud, that act of kindness you showed when you felt emotionally drained, that decision to forgive when everything in you wanted to hold on to hurt, all of these matter in ways we may not see until eternity. As this part of the vision intensified, I felt a deep prayer rising within me, not just for myself, but for everyone who would hear this message. It was a prayer for courage to step out of our comfort zones and into the purposes God has prepared. A prayer for wisdom to navigate the challenges ahead with grace and discernment. A prayer for a renewed commitment to the things that matter most, even when the world around us seems to be falling apart. This prayer extended to believers who have grown weary in their faith, who have been hurt by the church, who have lost hope in the possibility of real change. I prayed for a restoration of their passion, healing for their wounds, and a renewed vision for what God wants to do through his people. The enemy has worked overtime to discourage and sideline believers, but Jesus wants to breathe new life into tired hearts and recommission those who have felt forgotten. I prayed for unity among believers across denominational lines, racial divides, and cultural differences. The vision made it clear that the challenges ahead require all of God's people working together, not competing against each other or fighting over secondary issues. When we stand united in love and truth, we become an unstoppable force for good in a world desperate for hope. This call to awaken also means embracing our identity as ambassadors of God's kingdom here on earth. We're not tourists just passing through, waiting for heaven. We are representatives of a different realm, called to demonstrate what life looks like when God's love, justice, and truth reign supreme. This is both a high calling and a profound privilege. Being an ambassador means speaking truthfully, but with gentleness, acting justly while showing mercy, living with integrity, even when no one is watching. It means representing God's character in our marriages, our workplaces, our neighborhoods, and our communities. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to show what God's kingdom looks like in practical terms. I believe this message carries a special urgency for our current moment in history. The world around us is hungry for hope, truth, and authentic love like never before. Social media has connected us globally while leaving us more isolated than ever. Political divisions have torn apart families and communities. Economic uncertainty has left millions feeling anxious about the future. In the midst of all this chaos, people are searching desperately for something real, something that transcends the turmoil and confusion. By awakening to these spiritual realities and living them out authentically, we become channels of God's grace and agents of transformation. We offer a different way of living that attracts others, not through argument or persuasion, but through the power of genuine love and hope in action. I want to encourage you, if you're feeling this stirring in your heart, to respond boldly, Don't let fear of the unknown or doubt about your qualifications hold you back. God doesn't call the equipped, He equips the called. Don't wait until you feel ready, because the enemy will always provide reasons to delay. Embrace the call to unity with other believers, to love deeply even when it's costly, and to persevere with unwavering faith regardless of what comes. Seek God earnestly through prayer and His Word. Surround yourself with a community of believers who will encourage you and hold you accountable. Be willing to step into the unknown with trust, knowing that God's plans for you are good, even when you can't see the full picture. As I close this chapter of sharing, I'm reminded that this journey is ongoing. There will always be new challenges to face and deeper mysteries to uncover, but the foundation remains the same: God's love, truth, and faithfulness. These anchors will hold us steady regardless of what storms may come. Let's commit to praying for one another, that we would be strengthened for the battles ahead, encouraged when discouragement comes, and equipped to stand firm in our faith, that we would shine brightly as beacons of light in a world longing for peace and redemption, and that together we would walk this path of awakening with joy, courage, and unwavering commitment to the one who calls us by name. The road ahead may not always be easy, but it's filled with purpose and the promise of God's presence every step of the way. The darkness is real, but the light is stronger. The battle is intense, but the victory is assured, and we have the incredible privilege of participating in the greatest story ever told. The story of God's love transforming the world, one heart at a time. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Let's continue to seek, to listen, and to serve with hearts wide open to whatever God wants to do in and through us. The awakening has begun, and there's no turning back.